Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to call to order this 30th regular meeting of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development and to give Ms. Amina J. Mohammed, Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on the post-2015 development planning, a warm welcome to the Organization of American States. To begin, I am pleased to submit for your consideration the draft order of business contained in document CD/OD-30/13 revised version number 1. If there are no comments, the draft order of business will be approved. The first item in the order of business refers to the role the OAS can play in the post-2015 development agenda, bearing in mind that what the OAS undertakes in the development sphere does not and should not occur in isolation of the rest of the multilateral system. Ms. Amina J. Mohammed has kindly accepted our invitation to address this council and inform us on the post-2015 development planning. She will also share with us the results of the last UN General Assembly and will look at how we can strengthen and better coordinate the existing OAS collaboration with this process. I do not need to remind anyone of the important work this Council has been doing as part of the development agenda, including through its ministerial and high-level processes and its technical and cooperation mechanisms. In that respect, we are in an ideal position to make positive contributions as we look ahead to the post-2015 development agenda. To put things in perspective, it should be noted that the substantive and technical debate on the progress of the Millennium Development Goals that began in 2012 and continues throughout this year has been present throughout the world. Now, 2 years before the deadline established by the global community, the reflection has also started on the post-2015 development agenda. While this technical debate has become increasingly relevant, political negotiations for the post-2015 agenda will be starting next year. We find today that we are in a very timely moment to raise the profile of the Americas, most of which countries are considered middle-income countries, in order to ensure that the post-2015 vision is relevant to the challenges we face in the region. In this framework, the OAS is key in the construction of such a vision, with the specific and unique role to strengthen the capacity of our local and national governments, and also of the inter-American system, so that we can accomplish the goals that result from this debate. I am now pleased to offer the floor to Mr. Hugo de Sela, Chief of Staff of the Secretary General, who has a special message to convey to us from the Secretary General. Mr. de Sela, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Efectivamente, en nombre del Secretario General de nuestra organización, quiero expresar nuestra complacencia por tener hoy con nosotros a la doctora Amina Mohammed, asesora especial del Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas para la planeación de la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015. Este es un tema que es de muy particular interés, como todos sabemos, para nuestra organización, y no solo como organización, sino también nuestros países miembros han venido siguiendo muy de cerca y participando en los debates que se han generado a nivel global y regional para el cumplimiento de los objetivos de desarrollo del milenio, así como para la definición de los desafíos que la comunidad global abordará a partir del año 2015. Estamos entonces en un proceso de reflexión para apoyar el fortalecimiento de las instituciones del gobierno de manera tal que nuestros países puedan responder a los desafíos plasmados en esos objetivos del desarrollo y en los que se formularán para la agenda post post-2015. Lo que queremos en síntesis es, por lo menos desde el punto de vista de la OEA, aportar a una institucionalidad interamericana fortalecida y comprometida con el desarrollo de todos los pueblos. En ese sentido, la Secretaría Ejecutiva para el Desarrollo Integral ha distribuido un breve informe que da cuenta de algunas de las más recientes acciones desarrolladas en la organización con respecto a estos asuntos. Sin embargo, quisiera destacar que, entre otros, hemos hecho esfuerzos por apoyar a los países en fortalecer e implementar estrategias de promoción y protección social para atender a las poblaciones que viven en pobreza extrema. Nos hemos ocupado también de la atención a la mitigación de desastres naturales, así como a los impactos del cambio climático, a la promoción del uso de energías renovables, la generación de oportunidades de empleo a través del fortalecimiento de pequeñas y medianas empresas, la mejora de oportunidades educativas y el desarrollo del capital humano, la atención a las inequidades de género en la institucionalidad laboral. Como es natural, nuestra organización no actúa en el vacío, así que hemos colaborado también en importantes alianzas con otras agencias, con organizaciones, y esto es solo a modo de ejemplo que lo menciono, como la FAO, PMA, CEPAL, PNUD, la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, parte de nuestro sistema, el Banco Mundial, otra institución del sistema, el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, la CAF, el Banco de Desarrollo de las Américas, para atender distintas metas de salud, alimentación y desarrollo de la infraestructura. Y como ya es tradición en nuestra organización, en estos procesos hemos hecho grandes esfuerzos para tener una participación activa de la sociedad civil que nos ha presentado insumos valiosos para el desarrollo de estas tareas. En ese sentido, creemos que es importante proponer para el 2015, y esta parece ser una tendencia que se está imponiendo, proponer, decía, para el 2015 una visión más comprensiva del desarrollo que involucre, entre otros, la gobernabilidad democrática, la transparencia y el respeto a los derechos humanos, temas en los cuales los países miembros de esta organización han hecho aportes fundamentales y, por cierto, los ha hecho también nuestra organización como conjunto. Bien, finalizo diciendo que la OEA, a través del trabajo que hacemos en lo que llamamos nuestros pilares fundamentales, la promoción del desarrollo integral, la seguridad multidimensional, el fortalecimiento de la democracia y la promoción de los derechos humanos, está dando su aporte a la institución universal para trabajar en esta visión del post-2015. Estamos convencidos entonces que esta visita servirá para profundizar la alianza que ya tenemos con las Naciones Unidas, ojalá para escuchar algunas ideas que puedan enriquecer los debates globales en la materia y para que el apoyo y las propuestas que podamos llevar desde la región de las Américas puedan ser útiles para este diálogo a nivel mundial. Termino entonces dándole nuevamente la bienvenida a la doctora Mohamed, al asesor especial del Secretario General de Naciones Unidas, a quien escucharemos con el mayor de los intereses. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Sela. Please convey to the Secretary General our appreciation for these contributions to our dialogue. I am now honored to introduce our distinguished guest, Ms. Aminta Mohamed, who in July 2013 was appointed to the post of Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on the post-2015 development planning. She brings to the post more than 30 years of experience as a development practitioner in the public and private sectors, as well as in civil society. Prior to her present appointment, Ms. Mohammed was the CEO and founder of the Center for Development Policy Solutions, a think tank established to address the policy and knowledge gaps within the government, parliament, and private sector in development. She also lectured as adjunct professor of the Master's Program for Development Practice at Columbia University in New York. Prior to that, Ms. Mohammed served as the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Nigeria on the Millennium Development Goals after serving 3 presidents over a period of 6 years. She has served on numerous international advisory panels and boards, including the Global Development Program of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Secretary General's Global Sustainability Panel, the Hewlett Foundation on Education, the African Women's Millennium Initiative, and the ActionAid International Right to Education Project, to name just a few. Before offering the floor to Ms. Mohammed, I wish to express to her our most sincere appreciation for the effort she has made to be able to join us today. We are looking forward to listening to her presentation. Ms. Mohammed, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me first start by appreciating the opportunity to come and share what we have been doing over the past year as we began the journey of looking at the post-2015 development agenda. I know everyone has got competing demands on their time, but the Organization of American States is an incredibly important partner for this. Many of your states have, of course, been part of the process, but to have you in one place and to have a discussion that I hope we will take away much to input into what we go ahead with over the next couple of years. So I'm really delighted to be here to discuss the post-2015 development agenda. As we're all aware, the importance and magnitude of the task of defining the new development agenda as laid out by Rio+20 last year provides for an incredible opportunity, but a huge responsibility and challenge coming from a development agenda that we had. The MDGs laid out for us in 2000 was very much a prescription, and these came to our countries and in varying degrees took us time to own them and to run with them. I, for one, coming from Nigeria, it was not until the target date of reviewing what we had done on gender in 2005 did we even begin to look at the MDGs as part of our development planning process. So I know that having now the opportunity to have a conversation about this, to discuss it, and for member states to take ownership, that we have a greater chance in 2015 of running with this from the onset. But over the past year, what it has shown is that we have the bigger challenge of it being a transformative agenda, moving from poverty to sustainable development. It is also one that has many more partners than we have ever envisaged in knowing that the agenda is much bigger. But having said that, certainly the Millennium Development Goals for us have been the most successful global anti-poverty push in history. The MDGs have contributed and achieved a significant and substantial progress in many of the poverty agendas around the world. I would say, as we always did in Nigeria, that they provided for us a foundation. The acronym might have been new, but within our constitutions, these are all rights that were to be expected from our people in delivering health and education, leaving no one behind on that agenda, our women especially, access to water and sanitation. These are all very, very much our foundational issues, not a ceiling. And so when we see how difficult that was to achieve, we know that the challenges going ahead will require much more and deeper thought about how we address them. However, now we have less than 1,000 days, 800 days to the 2015 target date, and we still have challenges. Indeed, more than 1 billion people still live in extreme poverty, and the prospects for achieving all the MDGs differ sharply across and within countries. We've also seen some achievements in reducing inequalities, but they're deepening in other places, and we know that that remains still a task that is unfinished. The situation can partly be explained by the fact that new challenges have emerged while some old ones have intensified. And these critical issues include conflicts, fragility, employment, especially for our young people, inequality, demographic dynamics, environmental challenges and climate change, and very much the knowledge gaps that we live with. Notwithstanding, in more than a decade of experience, we have learned that focused global development efforts can make a difference, and through accelerated action and unrelenting efforts, the world can achieve the MDGs, and the general momentum for an ambitious and inspiring post-2015 development framework can be achieved. It is now the time to really look at the lessons that we've learned, step up our efforts to build a more secure, just and sustainable future for all. The voices at all levels have made clear that business as usual is not going to be acceptable. The way in which we have addressed in defining and crafting a development agenda has to be done differently given the challenges that we have. Often in the discussions that I have come across in the last year, many will say the MDGs did not do X or Y or Z. I think they never really responded to the complexities that we have today. We have a very good Millennium Declaration. That Millennium Declaration is still valid today as it was in 2000. But as I've just mentioned, we have new emerging challenges that have come to face us. So even the finishing off the MDGs and transitioning is going to have to take many of those instances into account. The post-2015 development framework will need to build on the progress that we've achieved while confronting the persistent inequalities and, as I say, the new challenges that are faced by people and planet. The American states represent an important group where such a balance of people and planet will need to be achieved. This is a region of huge potential, great challenges, and it remains at the very top of the Secretary-General's priorities. Indeed, the ongoing design of the post-2015 development agenda has already benefited from eminent voices within the region who participated in the Secretary-General's high-level panel on post-2015 development agenda, and they include members from Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, and the USA. And continue beyond the voices of the high-level panel, we've had the opportunity to engage many instances in science and academia, in civil society, and the kind of response that we've had from Latin America and the Caribbean and other American states has been quite incredible over the past year, and it continues with the momentum to build. In the last decade, the region has witnessed considerable development on the one hand, but also faces critical challenges that require special attention. These include continued democratic governance, greater economic growth, and diminishing levels of poverty, despite one of the highest rates of inequality in the world. The demographic dynamics, the speed and autonomy of urbanization processes, the vulnerability to extreme national events that have recently been exacerbated by climate change, and the region's dependency on the environment and natural resources. Although the region has become more resilient to financial crisis and has made significant progress in meeting several MDGs since 1990, experience shows that economic growth fails to achieve sustainability when it leaves out one of the two other dimensions of social justice and environmental sustainability. Environment cannot be treated as a secondary consideration, nor can progress be achieved or sustained amidst armed conflict, violence, crime, insecurity, and injustices. These ills often have roots in social and economic deprivation and inequality. With one of the highest rates of inequality in the world, and I must say we have to congratulate those places that have actually been able to reduce it, while we say we still have more to do. It is essential that countries in the region adopt targeted social policies that are part of a universal and distributive social protection system to reduce vulnerability and disrupt the intergenerational transmission mechanisms of social exclusion and inequality. Reductions in extreme poverty rates are of limited value if the threat of falling back into poverty persists and if inequalities based on gender, ethnicity, and territorial factors remain. The strengthening of institutions and the rule of law at all levels, together with human security, are also essential conditions for addressing the challenges of a new agenda. In other words, how are we going to respond to the very living environments that we speak to every day for the billions of people that we have to address? Finally, sustainable development in the small island developing states is both more challenging and more urgent due to the unique and distinctive vulnerabilities of these states. Many islands in Latin America and the Caribbean are threatened by rising sea levels, remoteness, insularity, human, financial, and technical constraints, and an excessive dependence on scarce natural resources and international trade. Another growing concern is the increasing number and severity of natural disasters that devastate entire sectors, including agriculture and infrastructure. Moving through the post-2015 process and OIS voices in it, the post-2015 agenda has provided an opportunity for a paradigm shift in international development that builds on the MDGs but addresses the eradication of poverty within the context of sustainable development with its three core dimensions. And we speak to dimensions. I know sustainable development has been spoken about as pillars and sometimes the lenses, but the dimensions, noting that we really need to look at economic, social, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development as key avenues for addressing the eradication of poverty. With a world of 7 billion people, 1.3 billion still remains the core focus of what we need to achieve in terms of focusing on the most vulnerable. Emerging consensus highlights the need to promote a universal, single and coherent post-20 global development agenda. And this has been quite a challenge to move from where we looked to a north-south agenda where the goals were poverty-focused and essentially the coherence of those factors against the environment not achieved. So moving to that has been one conversation that has been quite a challenge over the past year and continues to have many unresolved issues. Based on several inputs, the Secretary-General submitted to the 68th General Assembly last month, and so for me this is an opportune time to come out of the General Assembly with an outcome document where member states really gave much more clarity and a roadmap to what we need to do after a year of discussion. We produced a report, A Life of Dignity for All, which summarizes the vision of the Secretary-General for bold action that needs to finish off the MDGs, provide a transition and recommendations to a post-2015 agenda. And I think to be thought about in these three stages where there is unfinished business and promises that have been made to so many poor, but understanding moving from a poverty agenda to sustainable development will not happen overnight and requires a transition in how we address the implications of sustainable development in our different countries if we are to be in the driving seat, to those key elements that we would speak about shortly on the post-2015 agenda. The SG's report really underscores key elements that are emerging for the post-2015, and it does build on the high-level panel of eminent persons' recommendations. First, universality, mobilizing developed and developed countries that leaves no one behind. And it really is much about how we take care of those people at the bottom rung of the ladder. How do we invest in the most vulnerable of our societies to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind? And this has been a controversial notion and concept of, if we're moving to universality, how do we make sure that we don't have people falling off of it, because it becomes then quite a huge agenda. Sustainable development, as I had mentioned earlier, is the second element, tackling the interlinked challenges of facing the world's rising inequalities, but also the poverty agenda, a clear focus of ending extreme poverty in our time by looking at this through the three different lenses of economic, social, and environmental. The third of the elements, inclusive economic transformations, ensuring decent jobs backed by sustainable technologies and a shift to sustainable patterns of consumption and production. Really digging deep this time, going beyond a best practice or a pilot project to scale. And to go to scale, we need to look at how we will begin to invest in sustainable development through economic transformations, infrastructure, and the technologies that require not just a transfer, but the capacities at the other end to engage with them to make useful for that transformation to happen. The fourth of the elements had been around the governance agenda, looking at the need for us to have peace based on rule of law, sound institutions, and capacities as key outcomes and enablers of development. We didn't have the governance agenda within the MDGs, but it is the glue that keeps it together, really strengthening institutions and capacities to access justice, the rule of law, particularly for our women and young people as we move forward, deepening our democracies. This, the fourth of the elements that we outlined. The fifth had been a new global partnership, going beyond Goal 8, which talked about financing for development, recognizing shared interests, different needs and mutual responsibilities to ensure commitment to and means of implementation of this new vision. And what we are talking about here is that we recognize, and certainly many of our panel members underscored this, the resources in the world exist to resolve the problems that we have today. What we need is a will to move those resources to the places that need them to use them best. We do need the accountability mechanisms for this, but we need the partnerships. ODA served the poverty agenda, and it didn't always do that so well. Domestic resources are going to play a big part of what happens. Other resources from private finance will also do the same, but there needs to be a recognition that more partnerships will need to engage with this agenda, which will be far bigger than the poverty agenda that we had in the past. The sixth of the elements that we brought is that having put this on the table, the need to be fit for purpose, and the UN had the high-level political forum that came into being over this GA, really to look at the coordination and coherence of a sustainable development agenda. It is a paradigm shift. There is transformational, structural challenges that we will face at the country level. So we need to ensure that the international community is equipped with the right institutions and tools to address the challenges of implementing and facilitating a sustainable development agenda. Donors, the United Nations systems, countries need to ask what needs to happen for this to actualize itself at the national level. We'll be looking at one set of goals, one agenda, global goals with targets at the national level that make impact. What sort of institutions will need to be in place? How will we need to respond to this? And if we are proposing this at the level of international institutions, then we really do need to address that from now. For this ambitious development framework to take shape and unfold, there is general agreement among the international community that a business-as-usual approach won't be feasible, and therefore the radical change of course and action will require that shift. Going forward, during the special event that we held just over a week ago to achieve the MDGs, countries lauded the remarkable progress made so far towards achieving the goals, but they also expressed great concern at the unevenness and the gaps in the MDG's achievement, and agreed to take the purposeful and coordinated action required to accelerate progress. I think we can say where there is coordinated action, we do get results. In particular, I see how we have been able to use, in my country, for instance, the debt relief gains to mobilize from 3 tiers of government in a federal system, different resources to delivering education, health, and empowering women. So finishing off the MDGs really gives us the integrity to begin to speak about a bigger agenda. The outcome document of this special event, countries agreed, giving us much more clarity to a roadmap to hold a high-level summit in September 2015, which would launch an ambitious and transformative development agenda that would balance the 3 elements of sustainable development. They'd also given a mandate to the Secretary General to synthesize the full range of inputs available from the ongoing processes in the GA and report back before the end of 2014, and that really the intergovernmental consultations for this begin from the 69th session, which is September in 2014. What we are saying is that we do have 2 intergovernmental processes that are important right now, where member states are guiding the evolving a set of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, by September. They've also engaged in an experts committee to formulate a financing framework. It's a very clear message from our member states that if we get a substantive agreement around a development agenda, what is absolutely essential is a financing framework that will go together with this. And this is a huge challenge given the differing challenges we have around the world with the financial crisis that we all went through. During the next 12 months, that open working group and the Sustainable Committee, the Committee on Sustainable Development Financing, will be intense. It has opened up discussions, and many of the member states around this table have participated, and we have tried as much as possible to include business, civil society, experts from the science and academic communities to inform what is an ambitious agenda. And we expect that halfway through the next year, the President of the General Assembly, there will be negotiations to formulate these goals. We will inevitably need to arrive at one single and cohesive development agenda with sustainable development at its core. And I will say one of the major challenges we've had is that in going to a sustainable development agenda, we have been challenged by the concerns of many member states that the poverty agenda would be left behind. And so how, in fact, would we achieve the eradication of poverty by 2030, extreme poverty by 2030, through an agenda of sustainable development? Many feel this is a poverty agenda and an environment agenda. What we're trying to say is that we will achieve the eradication of poverty looking at it through investments that are made for economic transformation, acknowledging the environmental aspects of it and social inclusion. Over the next 2 years, member states will discuss and unpack a number of critical issues. We have a number of issues that we can say we have consensus around, and we need to bank that, but there are many contentious issues that remain to be discussed and resolved. Amongst them, the common but differentiated responsibilities, means of implementation, including the role of trade and ODA. These discussions will continue to happen in parallel with the negotiations of the climate change track, and while that remains a separate track from the development one, will evolve and end up with a legally binding agreement. The development track doesn't end up with a legally binding agreement, a set of cohesive goals that will move our countries to invest in will be as compelling as it needs to be. But we need to keep these two, I think, also understand that there will be a synergy between the two. A lot of the arguments for climate change will be from the substance of a development agenda. So while separate, they will be mutually reinforcing over the period of the next year. The voice of American states will need to be heard in this process, and so far the region, as I said, has played a key role and represented in the Open Working Group. We need to find more open spaces within and outside the UN process to ensure that these voices are clear, your priorities as we go forward are clear. The development agenda so far, I can say last year people were asking for 150 goals by the time we tallied them. We're not going to get a set of goals beyond what you can count on your two hands. Ultimately, politicians will not invest in what is an agenda that is so heavy it won't lift itself off the ground within a time of 4 years. I've worked over a period of time with 3 different presidents, and every time we came into a new dispensation, there were new priorities. The one thing the development agenda did for us was give us that one thread that we could pull through the 3 presidencies. I think the role of our countries in the capitals in implementing and ensuring the political will for this is going to be important, that we engage with them at this stage and not land an agenda at the country level without having done that. So we hope that the second phase of the UN system's conversations with countries will deepen the discussions at the country level, at the regional level. It is important that the regional economic commissions also come together really to formulate the plans of how we move forward. So as I said, the capitals will need to clearly have ownership, so that we're not just talking about what is negotiated in New York. And we hope that in closing, I believe that ours really is the first generation with the resources and the know-how to end extreme poverty and put our planet on a sustainable development course before it's too late. We need to aspire to eradicate poverty, protect the environment, and promote economic opportunity for all. That's really the big issue with the inequality. There have been 2 discussions and challenges to this. Is it an economic opportunity? Are we opening up inequalities to opportunity or to income? Both of these discussions are still one that is being had. We do underscore that the failing on this development agenda is not an option. We've shown that we can create a better world for people to live in. It's essential that we bring back dignity into the lives of those 1.3 who live below the poverty line, but not to forget that we have over 1.5 billion people who are living in fragile countries in a state of fear and conflict every year. Partnerships is going to be key to this, within countries, across borders, and globally. So I again would like to thank you all for engaging with this. I hope that from the questions and the discussion that we have in the time that we have, that we can begin this conversation and deepen it with the OAS, and as I said, seek for wider consultations in a number of different spaces that bring different challenges into an agenda that really needs to ensure that stakeholders at the local, national, sub-regional and continental levels ensure ownership and accountability. For this, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed, for your very comprehensive and illustrative presentation. It is very clear from the presentation that some underlying themes spring out at us immediately. For instance, the whole issue of that we're in a period of transition and reevaluation in the global context, which is not dissimilar to what we're experiencing right now within our own organization, when we have begun the exercise of rethinking the strategy, the vision of the OAS going forward, the issue of moving from focusing on poverty and poverty alleviation to sustainable development, to trying to alleviate poverty within the wider context of sustainable development and the many challenges that connotes. The concept of the universality of development, the idea that no one will be left behind, I think is something that introduces some new ideas, absolutely valuable so far. When we have spoken in this organization about universality, it is usually in relation to the issues of human rights. So it would be good to explore the widening of that concept in the context of development. I would now like to open the floor to delegations that wish to refer to this presentation and who wish to share their reflections on how the OAS can play a more dynamic role in this planning stage of the post-2015 development agenda. I also must point out that Ms. Mohammed is on a rather limited schedule today, and so as to ensure that we can listen to all the delegations that wish to intervene, I respectfully request that interventions be succinct and to the point. The floor is open. La delegación de El Salvador tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente, estimados representantes permanentes, invitados especiales, amigos todos. Sean mis primeras palabras para brindar una cordial bienvenida a este Consejo y a la Casa de las Américas a la doctora Amina Mohammed, asesora especial del Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas para la Agenda del Desarrollo post-2015. Más aún, luego de haber escuchado con mucha atención su muy comprensible intervención sobre lo que es la visión del máximo organismo universal en lo que será la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015. Su presencia, estimada señora, e intervención es más que oportuna, pues a solo pocos días atrás escuchábamos a nuestros jefes de Estado y de Gobierno referirse con visión y con firmeza al tema la Agenda para el Desarrollo después del 2015, preparando el terreno en el marco de la 68 Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. Como Organización de Estados Americanos, el tema de desarrollo no es ajeno a nuestros trabajos. Más aún, es uno de los pilares fundamentales cimentados en la Carta Constitutiva, sobre los cuales desarrollamos y emprendemos nuestros esfuerzos de cara no solo a coadyuvar en los esfuerzos globales de brindar a nuestras sociedades mejores condiciones de vida, sino también como parte de los compromisos de dotar a nuestras nuevas generaciones de un mundo mejor. La temática planteada ciertamente nos lleva a realizar un análisis y una reflexión sobre el rumbo que cada uno de nuestros países está siguiendo para alcanzar las metas que los objetivos del desarrollo del milenio nos trazaron. En tal sentido, un punto de partida natural debe ser el reconocimiento de que en los últimos tiempos se ha constituido un verdadero desafío para la prosperidad, el desarrollo y el progreso, sobre todo para aquellas regiones del mundo que han sufrido con mayor crudeza los efectos de la crisis económica internacional, del cambio climático y, por qué no decirlo, de los desastres naturales. Mi país, desde luego, no ha sido la excepción. Bajo la gestión del señor presidente de la República, don Mauricio Funes, El Salvador asumió no solo el compromiso de cumplir los objetivos del desarrollo del milenio, sino también como una ruta a seguir, estableciendo como objetivo prioritario en el plan quinquenal de gobierno, cito, el contar con una población sana, educada y productiva, que tenga la capacidad y las oportunidades adecuadas para desarrollar plenamente sus potencialidades y convertirse en la base principal de nuestro desarrollo. Fin de cita. En tal sentido, señaló asimismo el señor presidente Funes durante su reciente intervención ante la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas que El Salvador ha incorporado instrumentos y políticas estratégicas para lograr los objetivos del desarrollo del milenio al corto y mediano plazo, destinadas a combatir la pobreza, disminuir la desigualdad, procurar procesos de inclusión social y de crear nuevos mecanismos institucionales que permitan una distribución más equitativa de la riqueza y de los beneficios del crecimiento económico. Fin de cita. En el marco de los esfuerzos institucionales que coadyuvan al cumplimiento de los objetivos del desarrollo del milenio, deseo destacar la Alianza para el Gobierno Abierto, que es una iniciativa de la que formamos parte 54 países y que es liderada por Brasil y los Estados Unidos de América, la cual tiene como objetivo fomentar la participación ciudadana en la elaboración de propuestas que contribuyan a un plan de acción para mejorar el funcionamiento gubernamental. Dicho camino hacia la responsabilidad en la gestión gubernamental permitió que mi país fuera beneficiado en el año 2006 con una donación de 460 millones de dólares de la Corporación Reto del Milenio, corporación del gobierno de los Estados Unidos de América, siendo el propósito de la misma el generar obras de inversión pública destinadas a incrementar el crecimiento económico y la reducción de la pobreza, especialmente en la zona norte del país. Dicho programa finalizó inicialmente el 20 de septiembre del año anterior. En fecha reciente, un segundo compacto de 277 millones de dólares destinados a promover el desarrollo en toda la zona costera del país ha sido aprobada por la Junta Directiva de la Corporación Reto del Milenio y ha superado la etapa de consultas ante el Congreso de los Estados Unidos de América. El gobierno y el pueblo de El Salvador no pueden estar más que agradecidos con este tipo de iniciativas, promovida en particular por el gobierno amigo de los Estados Unidos, la cual, sin duda alguna, ayudan a nuestro país a transitar por el camino correcto hacia la consolidación del desarrollo y la reducción de la pobreza. No menos importante, resulta referirme a los esfuerzos que en el ámbito de la ONU se han venido realizando de cara a la inminente agenda post-2015. En tal sentido, hemos tenido la oportunidad de revisar el documento Una nueva alianza mundial, erradicar la pobreza y transformar las economías a través del desarrollo sostenible, que es un informe del Grupo de Alto Nivel de Personas Eminentes sobre la Agenda del Desarrollo Post-2015, de la cual nuestra distinguida invitada ha sido miembro importante, siendo muy inspiradoras las palabras iniciales en las que se retoma una cita del comunicado de Monrovia que dice, cito, nuestra visión y nuestra responsabilidad consisten en poner fin a la pobreza extrema en todas sus formas en el contexto del desarrollo sostenible y establecer los pilares de una prosperidad sostenida para todos. En ese orden de ideas, señor presidente, mi país comparte plenamente la visión de que una nueva agenda de desarrollo debería hacer avanzar el espíritu de la Declaración del Milenio y lo mejor de los ODM, con un enfoque práctico en torno a temas como pobreza, hambre, agua, recolección y tratamiento de basura, educación y atención médica, así como la inclusión y consideración de nuevos temas como el trabajo decente y la migración, entre otros. No puedo dejar de reconocer la valiosa labor que sobre la materia ha venido desarrollando la Secretaría General de la organización, particularmente la Secretaría Ejecutiva para el Desarrollo Integral, reconociendo el liderazgo de su secretaria ejecutiva, nuestra amiga Sherry Trost, a quien agradezco la visión que ha tenido al poner tan importante tema sobre la mesa de discusión del CD. El tema es apasionante. Los desafíos que como una humanidad tenemos por delante en torno al desarrollo son muchos. Sin embargo, cada esfuerzo realizado es digno de reconocimiento y por ello, de manera muy especial, deseo en nombre de mi delegación agradecer su presencia, doctora Amina Mohamed, así como su intervención esta tarde en este Consejo Interamericano para el Desarrollo Integral. La labor que está realizando para que desde el principal foro a nivel mundial contemos con una agenda y un norte claro sobre los objetivos del desarrollo posterior al año 2015 está más que presente. Muchas gracias.
Gracias al distinguido embajador de El Salvador. El embajador de Colombia tiene la palabra.
Gracias, señor presidente, embajador Néstor Méndez, señoras y señores representantes y alternos embajadores ante nuestra organización. Señora Amina Mohamed, asesora especial del Secretario General de Naciones Unidas para la planeación de la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015. Señora Sherry Trost, Secretaria Ejecutiva para Desarrollo Integral. Señor Jefe de Gabinete del Secretario General de la organización. Permítame empezar por agradecer a la señora Amina Mohamed su completa e interesante presentación propia de su formación, de su trayectoria, de sus ideas. Celebramos desde luego el trabajo y las recomendaciones que usted y los expertos del panel de alto nivel sobre las posibles componentes de una agenda de desarrollo post-2015. Su trabajo, sus reflexiones constituyen desde luego un referente ya para las decisiones que deben tomarse por parte de la comunidad internacional. También agradecemos a la señora Secretaria Ejecutiva de Desarrollo Integral por la organización de esta reunión de tanta importancia. Nuestro país ha señalado en forma reiterada y lo citaré en varias ocasiones textualmente, que hoy tenemos una oportunidad histórica para redefinir los parámetros del desarrollo. No basta con simplemente acordar una nueva edición de los Objetivos del Milenio. Así lo resaltó nuestra ministra de Relaciones en febrero de este año y prosigue. Nuestra oportunidad y nuestra obligación es elaborar un instrumento que sea tan efectivo para enfrentar los desafíos del futuro como lo fueron en los comienzos del siglo XXI los Objetivos de Desarrollo del Milenio. Es decir, tenemos el desafío a su vez de construir una agenda que se constituya en una plataforma para impulsar cambios estructurales y sistémicos. Una agenda de desarrollo bajo objetivos comunes que nos permita coordinar esfuerzos e impulsar estrategias eficientes. Hace 2 años y medio, Colombia le propuso a la comunidad internacional adoptar un nuevo conjunto de objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, los cuales están fundamentados en los ODM, pero que pretende mejorarlos, trascender con las experiencias ganadas y con una nueva aproximación que incorpora motores sociales, económicos, ambientales y sobre todo que se enfoquen no solo en qué se debe solucionar, sobre lo cual hay importantes consensos, sino cómo se debe hacer, cuáles las estrategias más apropiadas al efecto. Para Colombia, como lo ha señalado nuestra canciller, la nueva agenda tendría 5 elementos fundamentales. Primero, la agenda post-2015 debe ser universal. La nueva agenda debe ser aplicable a todos y relevante para todos. Segundo, debemos buscar logros irreversibles y de largo alcance. El hambre que eliminamos un día reaparece con más fuerza al día siguiente, y esto solo podemos evitarlo si atinamos a cambios profundos y duraderos. Se trata de lograr un bienestar irreversible. Tercero, la erradicación de la pobreza seguirá siendo el eje central de la nueva agenda, pero este logro solamente es posible en un contexto de desarrollo sostenible. Atender ese más de 1.000 millones de habitantes a los cuales usted se refiere, pues es sin duda un compromiso ético e inaplazable. Cuarto, la equidad debe ser el fundamento de esta nueva agenda. La equidad entendida en 3 dimensiones: mayor equidad al interior de los países, mayor equidad entre países y equidad intergeneracional, que se debe traducir en un férreo compromiso con los parámetros del desarrollo sostenible. Quinto, justamente las reflexiones sobre equidad obligan a considerar el nivel global. La nueva agenda internacional debe abordar elementos de las instancias globales tales como el sistema financiero internacional, el comercio internacional, procesos migratorios y el cambio climático, y aproximarse a temas que, como usted ha señalado, suponen una revisión de lo institucional, del enfoque empresarial, de la participación de la comunidad, de todos los actores del momento presente. Sin duda, esta es una coyuntura de desafíos y también de oportunidades. Es una oportunidad histórica. Cuando se apunta y se precisa con claridad el horizonte, el destino, el norte, se tiene una fuerza inconmensurable que jala, que atrae a nuestra humanidad hacia más civilización, hacia más equidad. Colombia asistirá a esta cita histórica con decisión y con entusiasmo.
Muchas gracias, señor embajador de Colombia. The ambassador of St. Kitts and Nevis has the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr. Mohammed, Executive Secretary, Madam Sherry Troth, my delegation wishes to convey its appreciation to Dr. Amina Mohammed for her enlightening and passionate presentation to us on the post-2015 development agenda. Clearly, we have reached a very critical juncture in a journey that began with the UN Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment in 1972, through the 2 Rio conferences on environment and development in 1992 and 2012, respectively. In between, we've had conferences on population, on women, and on financing for development. Throughout this journey, the core message has remained unchanged, that we must fashion modes of development that meet our needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. My delegation recognizes the broad truth that it is only through committed effort can poverty be eradicated, along with partnership and a core desire to build a better world through sustainable development. It is important to note that decades before the UN embarked on these conferences, the member states of the OAS, and I quote, inspired by the principles of inter-American solidarity and cooperation, had already pledged themselves to a united effort to ensure international social justice in their relations and integral development for their peoples as conditions essential to peace and security. Integral development encompasses the economic, social, educational, cultural, scientific, and technological fields through which the goals that each country sets for accomplishing it should be achieved. Those words confirm the vision and pioneering role of the OAS in the search for reforms of development that are durable, inclusive, equitable, and environmentally sustainable. The OAS has done groundbreaking work in this critical area and now has an opportunity to share the impact and lessons of this work with the global community. My country is blessed with a predominantly young population whose productive years are a fount of potential for the individual as for the nation. Our people, like people all over the world, deserve a quality of life which promotes individual growth, development, and freedoms along the goals prescribed by the MDGs and towards sustainable personal and national development post-2015. The design of the Sustainable Development Goals is a critical undertaking that bears on everything that we do in the OAS, and so it is vital that we remain engaged in the process. Your presentation here today, Dr. Mohammed, and the participation of Secretary General Insulza in the high-level panel established by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon are important first steps that must be sustained. We look forward to discussing a concrete role for the OAS in this process, within this Council, and in the Commission for Sustainable Development, which is mandated to deal with this subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. The Ambassador of Canada has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We too would like to thank Dr. Mohammed for her presence here and her presentation, in which she shared the UN's perspective on the post-2015 development agenda. We also recognize and thank the Chair and the Secretariat for bringing this timely and important discussion to this body, and we take this as a sign of the value that the OAS places on its own development work within the global context. Mr. Chairman, despite the significant progress that has been made on the current MDGs, there is still much work that needs to be done before they expire in 2015. And Canada as a country remains committed to doing its part in helping to advance progress, especially on those goals and targets that are lagging behind, such as maternal and newborn child health. A sound successor framework to the MDGs in the post-2015 era will be absolutely essential to the achievement of global development results. It should remain focused on our ultimate objective of poverty eradication, while retaining those elements of the existing MDGs and incorporate the new areas that require further attention, such as security, governance, and especially job creation. And these were all referred to in Dr. Mohammed's presentation. We believe that the poor and the most vulnerable of our societies, including women and children, should continue to be at the core of the post-2015 development agenda. In the development of this agenda, Mr. Chairman, we also believe that there should be one coherent vision and set the goals for the post-2015 agenda that motivates all of our development partners and inspire continued public support for development cooperation. To achieve this, these goals must be realistic, focused, and measurable. In this regard, Mr. President, we look forward to the OAS working to approve its own alignment of development mandates within this global context, as well as to set the necessary goal setting which is measurable and accountable. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to highlight Dr. Mohammed's comment regarding the setting of the goals. She mentioned that today there would need to be 150 new goals in the post-2015 environment, but she also emphasized the importance of reducing this to, quote, goals which are measurable on two hands. We are also facing a similar challenge here at the OAS, and we need to take this lesson into account in our own streamlining of our mandates so that we too can achieve effective goals which at the end of the day are realistic, focused, and measurable. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you to the Ambassador of Canada. The Ambassador of Barbados has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My delegation wishes to record its profound thanks also to Dr. Mohammed for her very lucid and thought-provoking presentation to us this afternoon. And my delegation now has a profound appreciation of the depth and span and potential of the impact of the post-2015 development agenda. One thing that is very clear from your presentation, Dr. Mohammed, is that post-2015 development is more than a UN agenda. It really and truly is a global agenda that goes beyond the capacity of any one country, region, or organization. In light of this, we are pleased to note that the close collaboration and cooperation that has taken place between the UN and the OAS in the evolution of the agenda. And we believe that the OAS in general and its Secretariat for Integral Development in particular is ideally placed to play a tangible role in the further elaboration of the agenda and in the design of the Sustainable Development Goals. We regard CD as a model of integral development encompassing the economic, social, environmental, human, cultural, scientific and technological dimensions under one roof. And we look forward to receiving from Executive Secretary Sherry Tross a concrete plan of action on CD's role in advancing the P2015 agenda for our review and endorsement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to the Ambassador of Barbados. The delegation of the United States has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Dr. Mohammed, on behalf of the United States, I would like to thank you for coming to the OAS to share with all of us here your vision for the post-2015 agenda. On a personal note, I was privileged during 2011 and much of 2012 to lead our government's preparations for the UN Conference on Sustainable Development, Rio Plus 20. And so I can assure you of the deep commitment of the United States to this agenda, as well as to a very productive and effective process that Dr. Mohammed is contributing to. While it is true that much remains to be accomplished, we concur that there has already been real and measurable progress in this area. The UN's recent MDG report shows that 3 important MDG targets have been met well ahead of the target date of 2015. So even as we begin the process of laying the foundation for future development goals, the U.S. hopes that the focus on achieving or even exceeding the current goals is not lost. The U.S. firmly believes that development of the world's poorest countries is a moral, strategic, and economic imperative, one which we all share. We reaffirm the importance of the MDGs as a shared objective of the global community and call for continued focus to maintain progress toward achieving the goals. As you clearly demonstrated in your remarks, progress has indeed been uneven, and we do have major work ahead. The United States recognizes these challenges and commits to focusing on achieving or even exceeding the current goals. The United States will remain on course with its support to the MDGs to reduce hunger, improve health, and ensure environmental sustainability. We have sought to accelerate progress through major initiatives, such as the Global Health Initiative, the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, the Feed the Future and G8 New Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition initiatives, and the Global Climate Change Initiative. Looking forward, we believe that our future agenda should address the mutually beneficial relationship of poverty reduction and sustainability. Economic growth is compatible with environmental sustainability. At the same time, we must address all aspects of sustainable development, as Dr. Mohammed pointed out, the social, economic, as well as environmental dimensions. The United States believes that we have a historic opportunity to make a decisive push to end extreme poverty in our time. In his 2013 State of the Union speech, President Obama emphatically stated that, quote, "The United States will join with our allies to eradicate such extreme poverty in the next 2 decades by connecting more people in the global economy and empowering women, by giving our young and brightest minds new opportunities to serve and helping communities to feed, power, and educate themselves, by saving the world's children from preventable deaths, and by realizing the promise of an AIDS-free generation, end quote. Thank you again for coming to the OAS today. We look forward to working closely together in the coming year on the post-2015 development agenda. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the delegation of the United States. The delegation of Brazil has the floor.
Obrigado, senhor presidente. Eu achei que a presidência ia passar a palavra em português também. Fica para a próxima vez. Obrigado. Antes de mais nada, a delegação do Brasil gostaria de agradecer a presença da doutora Amina Mohamed. De fato, a sua apresentação foi bastante ampla, bastante clara e indica com perfeição os pontos principais que devemos considerar nesse debate. Eu gostaria de agradecer também à secretária Sherry Tross por ter trazido esse tema a esse plenário. Certamente é um dos temas mais importantes para a nossa organização, para a nossa região, pelos mais diversos motivos, mas certamente um dos mais importantes é o fato, inclusive mencionado pela doutora Mohamed, de que esta é uma das regiões, é uma região com um dos piores índices de distribuição de renda no planeta. Ou seja, é um fator fundamental que deve ser atacado e temos de dar atenção especial a isso em nosso hemisfério. Essa realidade se reflete no Brasil também. Durante muitos anos, o Brasil se preocupou em fazer crescer o bolo com a desculpa, talvez, de que com um bolo grande, sim, poderíamos fazer a distribuição desses benefícios. Isso se mostrou uma falácia, porque, na verdade, nunca se chegava à conclusão de que o bolo estava suficientemente grande para essa distribuição. Felizmente, nos últimos anos, os últimos governos brasileiros se deram conta de que manter essa filosofia acabaria por acorrentar o desenvolvimento do país. E felizmente passamos a entender que sim, podemos investir no crescimento desse bolo, mas à medida em que esse crescimento se processa, essa distribuição da riqueza e dos benefícios tem que se fazer concomitantemente. Não há que se esperar para uma distribuição posterior. O compromisso do Brasil com essa nova filosofia, com a ideia de um desenvolvimento sustentável, é bastante clara em termos, inclusive, da atuação do país e da promoção do desenvolvimento sustentável em termos globais. A Rio 92 e a Rio +20 são duas mostras do interesse que o governo brasileiro tem por esse tema e da compreensão da importância desse tema para o desenvolvimento global. A doutora Mohamed mencionou um aspecto que eu considero fundamental, sobretudo num momento em que nós vivemos uma situação de crise, talvez não tão exacerbada como há alguns anos atrás, mas certamente ainda uma situação de crise que afetou profundamente a Europa, que afetou este país e que teve reflexos profundos no restante do globo. A doutora Mohamed mencionou, de fato, essa região tem sido uma região com uma maior resistência a essas crises, mas isso, evidentemente, não significa que nós estejamos isentos ou estejamos imunes às dificuldades criadas por isso. E uma das primeiras consequências negativas foi justamente o fato de que esse crescimento sustentável que é necessário para a efetivação dos Objetivos de Desenvolvimento do Milênio se viu prejudicado com a perda deste vigor do crescimento, com a perda do vigor econômico na região. No caso brasileiro, mais particularmente, temos sentido muito isso. Mas, como a doutora Mohamed destacou, nem mesmo a crise pode servir como justificativa, porque ela disse, os recursos existem, ou seja, o que nós precisamos agora é levar esses recursos às áreas necessitadas. E, de fato, é uma questão, mais uma vez, de redistribuição dessa riqueza e desses benefícios. Eu gostaria de lembrar, então, que essa agenda pós-2015 deve ser, como mais uma vez mencionou a doutora Mohamed, deve ser uma agenda focada, deve ser uma agenda limitada no seu número. O embaixador Cullen do Canadá mencionou que nós vivemos aqui na OEA esse mesmo tipo de problema, com mais de 600 mandatos para cumprirmos, mandatos esses, nós temos dificuldade até em priorizá-los, justamente por essa quantidade, porque uma agenda carregada, no caso da agenda pós-2015, se pensarmos numa agenda com 150 objetivos, evidentemente teremos uma dispersão do interesse e uma dispersão dos nossos esforços, e não seremos capazes de cumprir com essas metas. Evidentemente, muitos criticam que os objetivos de desenvolvimento do milênio não foram cumpridos de maneira equânime. Mas eu acredito que nós devemos ser realistas, ou seja, nem seria possível que isso se desse de uma forma equânime, porque cada meta tem, evidentemente, uma série de elementos necessários à sua obtenção, à sua consecução, e com isso, evidentemente, os caminhos e os passos a serem trilhados são em ritmos diferentes. Mas isso é mais uma razão para que procuremos uma agenda mais focada, mais limitada na sua amplitude, exatamente para que não tenhamos uma dispersão desses esforços. E, por fim, eu gostaria de mencionar que essa situação de crise, evidentemente, nos desanima, muitas vezes, a levar adiante uma agenda de desenvolvimento pós-2015 no entendimento equivocado de que, se num momento melhor nós não tivermos condições de cumprir as metas que nós havíamos estabelecidos, num momento de crise, talvez isso não seja possível. Eu acho que o pensamento deve ser exatamente o oposto. Agora sim é que devemos, com mais esforço, com mais empenho, investir nessas metas, porque são essas metas justamente que nos levam adiante, que nos fazem dar os passos necessários, porque sem objetivos nós não temos condições de avançar nem mesmo nas nossas vidas pessoais. Então, é óbvio que essas metas são, por menos que elas sejam alcançáveis, elas dão um mirar ao futuro e nos dão uma esperança de que, com esforço e com determinação, nós tenhamos condição de, pelo menos, cumprir o máximo possível dessas metas, que evidentemente só trazem benefícios para todos nós. Mais uma vez, agradecendo a presença da doutora Mohamed e a excelente ideia da Sherry Tross de nos trazer esse tema para o debate. Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much to the delegation of Brazil. La delegación de México tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Por parte de México, agradecer a la doctora Amina Mohamed por su presentación, reconocer al presidente del CIDI, representante permanente de Belice, Néstor Méndez, a la secretaria ejecutiva para el Desarrollo Integral, Cherry Tross, el motivar una presentación de un tema tan relevante para nuestra región. Quisiéramos destacar que es un momento muy oportuno para esta presentación, derivado del ejercicio que actualmente se está realizando en la organización para avanzar con la conformación de la visión estratégica de la OEA. Sin duda, los elementos presentados el día de hoy serán muy importantes para este proceso. Consideramos que la Agenda de Desarrollo post-2015 deberá estar basada en los progresos obtenidos por los Objetivos del Milenio. Consideramos también que el nuevo marco debe ser aplicable a todos los países del mundo mediante la adopción de objetivos globales que permitan la adopción de metas nacionales acordes con las realidades de cada país. Los objetivos que deriven del proceso deberán de ser cuantificables, medibles y tener un plazo determinado. Apreciamos el tratar este tema en este foro porque estamos convencidos de que la nueva agenda debe considerar un ejercicio de definición incluyente y participativo. El nuevo marco de desarrollo posterior a 2015 debe centrarse en las personas, incorporar la equidad, la sostenibilidad y los derechos humanos como elementos transversales. Consideramos también que debe incluir temas de género de forma transversal, en virtud de que una agenda que incorpore plenamente a la mujer contribuye a resolver la desigualdad que afecta a la mitad de la población global. Asimismo, se deben considerar nuevas fuentes de financiamiento, entre las que se encuentran alianzas público-privadas, entre otras. En el marco del debate general de la pasada Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas, el canciller de México dio a conocer que en 2014 México convocará una reunión sobre la perspectiva global para la inclusión, cuyo objetivo será definir los parámetros de la participación de actores no gubernamentales en la formulación, ejecución y evaluación de las nuevas metas globales, así como en las políticas de desarrollo de cada país. Finalmente, señor presidente, nos permitimos destacar un tema que para nuestra delegación consideramos que no debería quedar fuera de este proceso. Es el de la contribución de la migración a nuestras sociedades. Consideramos que la OEA, a través de la Comisión de Asuntos Migratorios de este Consejo, debería poder hacer una contribución en esta materia. Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Gracias a la delegación de México. El embajador de Bolivia tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Mi representación agradece la importante presentación realizada por la doctora Mohamed, una presentación que nos motiva a trabajar de una manera más acelerada al interior de nuestra organización para que podamos contribuir de manera efectiva en la agenda post-2015. La agenda de desarrollo post-2015 se constituye un tema prioritario para nuestros países, para el hemisferio. Es así que el desarrollo también se constituye en un tema importante para nuestra organización, siendo uno de sus pilares fundamentales. Bolivia, bajo la presidencia del presidente Evo Morales, ha asumido con mucho compromiso los ODMs. Es así que a la fecha se han logrado avances importantes y en los últimos años se tienen varios de los objetivos del milenio ya cumplidos previos a la fecha o al plazo establecido, entre los cuales cabe destacar los relacionados a extrema pobreza, a la lucha contra el hambre, el tema de acceso al agua, educación, entre otros. De la misma manera, presidente, creemos importante una planificación a largo plazo. Es así que actualmente en Bolivia se viene trabajando en una Agenda 2025 como un instrumento que proyecte el desarrollo de mi país con una visión propia como es el vivir bien. Esta visión articulada a los desafíos internacionales con los cuales estamos comprometidos. Presidente, creemos que el trabajo de la Agenda post-2015 debe trabajarse en un marco de compromiso real y certero de todos los estados, un compromiso que ayude a superar justamente los grandes problemas ya destacados por la doctora Mohamed en su amplia exposición y un tema que realmente articule los esfuerzos de los estados y pueda permitir la superación de temas importantes que traen dificultades a nuestras poblaciones, a los pueblos de las Américas y del mundo. Por lo mencionado anteriormente, mi país está preparado para participar de manera comprometida y activa en este proceso, porque los temas abordados también constituyen temas prioritarios para Bolivia. Presidente, para concluir, quiero reiterar el agradecimiento a su presidencia, a la Secretaría Ejecutiva, por haber traído este tema a este Consejo, y creemos que es importante que podamos dar continuidad y podamos continuar discutiendo este tema en el futuro. Muchas gracias, presidente.
Muchas gracias al embajador de Bolivia. I will now offer the floor to our distinguished guest, Dr. Mohammed, for any final comments on what has come out from the floor. Dr. Mohammed, you have the floor.
Much, Mr. President, Excellencies. This is incredibly insightful and very constructive for us. The process we have is one that needs to be responsive to what we're hearing and to really, as we say, galvanize on the consensus we can bank, but tackle the issues. Everybody has been very welcoming of the post-2015, and I know the challenges are ahead. A year ago, if anybody said we would be where we are today, I would have said, well, I'm not sure, because it was a big challenge from Brazil as we were coming out. People really didn't think we'd be able to carry this agenda. But I know as we start to ask you to prioritize and get down to those goals that will form the framework by 2015, then that's when the real, struggles will start. So I hope that this conversation, as we say, to be continued. Really useful here for us, the governance agenda that was brought to the fore. We spoke about how we would look at a framework with goals, targets, and much more importantly than we didn't really have on the MDGs, the measurements of those, accountability. And we did speak to the data revolution in all of this, and I hope that that's something that we can start with now. Colombia has been very helpful in some of the work that it has done on a dashboard to really look at the monitoring and evaluation of a development agenda, and I think that that's worthwhile having further discussions on. One of the things that I'd like to highlight is that in the struggle to make sure everyone is represented in the next framework is to have a discussion where the goals are global in nature, the targets are country-specific, and measures that would inform both of these, and that not necessarily do you have to have a goal in order to achieve your objective. So how to demystify that whole conversation around a framework, I think, would be an important one to have, because many distractions happen if we don't see a cities goal or we don't see an infrastructure goal, and I think there are many ways of coming at it, and many of the conversations you have here will help inform our member states in the UN, in your collaborations, if we could help to sort this. It does have a considerable impact on getting to what is, as Excellency from Brazil had alluded to, a agenda that is going to continue to propel be light enough for us to push through and work with at the country level, and not that we end up with one so heavy we can't lift it September 2015. There are a lot of demands for an agenda that solves all the problems. I think it's useful. We did the World We Want, a social platform, media platform, went out and asked young people around the world, and so much consensus built on it. From the OAS, really, what we got back was that education was important, responsive government was important, health. Those are the top three that we saw feeding back, and then came jobs. I think this is useful to keep in mind when we're asking to respond to what citizens also want. The nexus between peace and development and human rights, and again, making this work within the framework and the key elements that we spoke about. As I said, the voices of the most vulnerable, our landlocked countries, least developed countries, particularly the SIDS, have been really influential in some of the discussions that we've had, and we're extremely happy to have the President of our General Assembly right now coming from Antigua and Barbuda, because he brings a perspective to that. He holds up in his whole year the post-2015, but he has 6 thematic groups that are extremely important to the agenda, and I would encourage that the OAS, whenever you have that time or space, to engage either with those discussions or, we would certainly be happy to share the outcomes of those discussions that may help inform that. It is an important part of what we think will help reinforce some of the priorities that countries have on this. I will continue to say that there is much work to be done on the MDGs, and so we really welcome the commitments that we had from many countries at the GA to reinforce this. There's a lot of work that Canada is doing through its IDRC on health in Africa. The US has been really forging the path ahead on building on what we've had in terms of our successes from PEPFAR, but looking at the Global Health Initiative and even engaging with the next agenda on sustainable energy has been an important part of signals to the future of what is possible. I'm a firm believer that we can get an agenda in 2015 that we can take home to implement. That's my hope. I'm new to the UN, member state not very long ago, but I see the opportunities. I see the incredible expertise. I see the commitment of member states. And it is my hope that, come 2015, I can go back to where we have 169 million people with 65% living below the poverty line. Shouldn't be, but we could make that happen. I would plead that we keep the momentum. This is a process that is not usual. Another 18 months to 2 years to discuss the same thing, trying to get to a set of objectives is going to be really difficult. Negotiations of member states on the outside world looking in will think of us getting the lowest common denominator. I think from discussions around the table today, what we've proved is that we can get the highest possible ambition. And that's the momentum that we need to keep for doing this. And I hope that you will offer us the opportunity to continue this discussion in rooms like this, but also in spaces outside in the different countries that we have around the table to make this a reality come 2015. It's the least 1.3 billion people deserve in terms of a new development agenda. We can do it. We can eradicate poverty, extreme poverty by 2030. And we can give hope to our young people who are just looking at us, wondering what on earth we are doing. It's not long that we will miss the opportunity of this youth bulge and they will become an aged bulge. We have to give them the capacity to carry the burdens that are ahead. They're not going to get lighter, they're going to get heavier, and we have to give them the tools and the environment to make it possible for them to carry that burden. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. For final remarks under this item, I offer the floor to Ms. Sherry Truss.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Mohammed. I think it's worth mentioning that Dr. Mohammed comes to us today at great personal sacrifice. She actually flew in from London to be with us because this is something we had been trying to set up for a while, based on a number of solicitations we received from member states. When you came to us and you said, it's important for us to have, within the context of the OAS and within the context of CD, a discussion about the post-2015 agenda. Obviously, much of what is going on at the UN level and being discussed around the globe is very important and has implications for what we're doing here at the OAS. And so we began working on this a few months ago. And we had several attempts, but this time it worked out. And frankly, the timing is fortuitous. Because as we all know, just a few days ago, the organization initiated a discussion on a strategic vision going forward. And I think some of the issues that Dr. Mohammed raised today probably will emerge during the course of those discussions. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention a couple of things. Within the context of the OAS development agenda, over time, the OAS has actually managed to create a certain degree of focus which we sometimes forget. And this organization is probably the only international one that has under one single roof working together the areas of sustainable development, economic development, human and social development, which does allow for the kind of integrated programming that Dr. Mohammed was speaking about. And I think that gives this organization really a comparative advantage in being able to support member states as you engage with your global counterparts on the issues that will emerge as the priority ones for the post-2015 agenda. And bring all of these elements into a coherent, effective development agenda. And I very much like the words that Dr. Mohammed used in saying, well, we begin to move from a poverty agenda to a sustainable development agenda. If you don't mind, I think I'm going to be using that from now on. But in that context, I also very much agree with her point that the voice of the OAS plays a crucial role and must continue to play a crucial role on these development issues. We circulated, I think, a document yesterday or the day before to member states, and the idea behind that was to share with you some of what's been going on over the course of the last several months in terms of our input into and collaboration with the UN and the post-2015 process. And I think you'll see that there's been really quite substantive engagement. Secretary General Insulza just participated in a UN high-level dialogue in the framework of the UN General Assembly, and he came back having participated in this discussion on sustainable development, and he has an excellent paper which I think we also shared with member states, and I think it's certainly something that's worth reading and chewing over. But behind all of this, I think what we're seeing really is an alignment in terms of how we're looking at many of the different issues that Dr. Mohammed discussed today. The process that's going on at the UN in terms of reflection is very similar to the process we're having here in terms of reflection. The consideration of how we look at development going forward. Is it simply what has been the traditional approach? It's a hard economic approach. How do we integrate the social aspect, and how do we look at the sustainable aspect? How do we integrate the voices of our wider population so that we have substantive buy-in into the program and agenda going forward? What Dr. Mohammed has been doing, going to different countries and in different constituencies, is actually engaging, not just with member states, which is absolutely important, and she has had the opportunity to do that here today with you, but also engaging with broader audiences, because the Millennium Development Goals tries to do something which many of our countries around this table, in talking to us in the development area, have been saying over time. We need to have partnerships. Whether it's institutions working together, institutions working more closely with governments, institutions of civil society, and having basically a 360-degree conversation going on among the different actors so that we're aware of the needs, the demands, the perspectives, what can be brought to the table, which will help us make the best decisions and the most effective decisions going forward. And so I'd just like to say that going forward, clearly the OAS, through its Secretariat for Integral Development and other areas of the General Secretariat, really look forward to working with you, Dr. Mohammed, and continuing to engage in this process and making any contributions that we can to help move this agenda forward. We realize it's in the interests of governments, we realize it's in the interests of people, and at the end of the day, we as an OAS are very much committed to doing all we can to advance sustainable and inclusive development in the Americas. So once again, I thank you for coming and doing everything you really could to be here today. It's really been worthwhile, and we very much appreciate the effort. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. It has been a very interesting discussion. I think everybody will agree. To close off this topic, I would like to propose that this Council first thanks and recognizes Dr. Mohammed for her presentation today. It has proven to be very, very useful, and it has provided a roadmap for a more interactive regional participation in the post-2015 development planning. I also want to call on delegations to further reflect on the presentation and discussions today, and to keep in mind the direction that the new global agenda is taking, especially as we begin discussions on the OAS strategic vision. We must also define how the OAS can be better placed to help our countries advance policies and programs that contribute to inclusive growth and sustainable development. Finally, I also wish to propose that this Council thanks the Executive Secretariat for the support, especially the documentation provided to this dialogue, and we request that it continue providing inputs in the framework of the regional technical dialogues on the post-2015 development agenda, particularly in the definition of the MDGs and the Sustainable Development Goals, and to keep this council duly informed. If there are no comments, it is so approved. Before we close this item, I would like to invite once again delegations to send to the Secretariat desired topics and potential speakers for future city meetings so that our meetings better respond to the interests of all member states, like today, and contribute to strengthen this council and our vision on the role, opportunities, and challenges of our work in the area of development. I also want to make a very quick commercial announcement. The next meeting, the central topic of the October 29th city meeting will be building on more sustainable cities and communities in the Americas, and our special guest for that will be the governor of Antioquia, Colombia, as well as representatives from the World Bank, the World Resources Institute, and Fundación Solar from Guatemala. I would now like to ask for a 1-minute break so that we can say goodbye to our distinguished guest.